Ahoy! Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another intel report. This series takes the same approach to the units in C&C Rivals as I take to a PUBG match. In short, I die repeatedly so that you don't have to. As usual, I want to give a huge shout out to my awesome crew of Patreons who keep this ship sailing. If you want to support this channel and my content, you can do so over at Patreon. Details are on screen now. Or by simply letting the adverts here play out completely. Liking, subscribing and sharing my videos goes a long way too. Today's intel report is another one that has been a long time coming. The big granddaddy of them all and one of the most iconic units in Command & Conquer history. You've all been asking for it, so today we're finally looking at the GDI Mammoth Tank. The Mammoth Mark III is the third generation of the GDI's imposing Mammoth tank line. The heaviest of GDI's tanks, the Mammoth is equipped with dual 150mm smoothbore cannons, as well as dual anti-aircraft rocket pods. There are very few units in C&C Rivals that are as imposing as the Mammoth tank. Built from the tech lab and costing at least twice as much as almost every other unit in the game, the Mammoth tank is the answer to the question, what if we gave a mountain tracks and armed it with cannons? It's definitely not the fastest unit in the game, but it has no need to be. It has the highest health value of any unit in the game, and it's able to obliterate entire armies on its own. The two turret-mounted cannons have radar, meaning that they will pulverize any vehicle unit that the Mammoth slowly trundles past. And its heavy tracks literally flatten enemy infantry. Oh, and it can do both of these simultaneously, by the way. If this wasn't frightening enough, the Mammoth is capable of firing at enemy aircraft too. Alright, I'll admit that the damage it does to air units is pretty pitiful, but let's be fair, this absolute unit needed some kind of weakness, and that's aircraft. Even then, your enemy can throw orcas and other heavy-hitting aircraft at it, and it'll take some considerable time before the Mammoth starts to feel it, by which point you should have a nearby slingshot or hammerhead to swat those bothersome flies.
I'm going to swat down a couple of bothersome flies.
The thing with a Mammoth is simply this. If your opponent is able to stall long enough using cheap enough units to save up for a Mammoth, then you're going to have to throw a lot at it. Ground vehicles are not a great option as the Mammoth's cannons punch through their armor like Mike Tyson punches through a damp paper bag. Multi-range units like the MLRS or artillery can do some damage, but don't expect them to last long. Infantry, even heavy tech infantry like zone troopers and cyborgs, will struggle. They might put a good dent in the side of the Mammoth, but seconds later, they'll be paste on the Mammoth's treads. Ultimately, anti-vehicle aircraft are by far your best bet, but failing that, multiple anti-vehicle infantry and vehicles swarming the Mammoth might just do it. Of course, if the Mammoth tank happens to be under the command of Jackson, or if there's an MSV unit nearby to buff it, good luck. So by now you're looking at these thick boys and wondering how you can squeeze some of that beef into your own deck. And why wouldn't you? The Mammoth is one of the most iconic and enjoyable to use units in the game. Now of course I've been doing my research and I have two decks for you to try out. First up is a little 2-3-1 deck that starts with your riflemen and missile squads at the barracks. These guys are your early scouting force and deal with most early threats. Stick with the barracks for as long as you can. Remember, the aim of the game here is to stall cheaply. If things start getting a little too hot for your infantry to handle, you can crank it up into the war factory. Here, shatterers melt any infantry coming your way. If your opponent's been harassing you with flamers or snipers, this is your answer. Slingshots will utterly shut down all aircraft that dares to think it can fly in your skies, and pitbulls round out the war factory with some anti-vehicle punch. Mainly here for dealing with things like shatterers, chem buggies, and cyber wheels. Remember, the aim is to stall the game. You don't necessarily need to be killing their army, just stop them getting to your harvesters and keep that missile either grey or yellow. You can charge it in your favour too. Get that Mammoth tank out, and if they have air, support with a slingshot. It's pretty much game over by that point. The second is a deck suggested by Natural Sky from the C&C Rivals community Discord, where he is practically Mr. Mammoth. I like to call this deck Mam Air. Again, Riflemen and Missile Squads are your early units. Scout and early threats are usually dealt with using these two units. Here, the Mam Air diverges from the previous deck by moving up into the Helipad. Here we have either Drone Swarms or Talons, then Mohawks and Hammerheads. Now, the toss-up between Talons and Drones ultimately comes down to your own preference. Both are here mainly to deal with infantry like snipers or chem warriors, stuff that your riflemen would struggle with. Talons are also able to deal with aircraft threats, but are more expensive to compensate. It's really up to you which way you want to run this. The Mohawks then pulverize most ground vehicles comfortably and can be swapped for Orcas if you absolutely don't have Mohawks at the right level. That said, I prefer the Mohawks as they're that little bit sturdier and can ultimately do more for a lower cost. Hammerheads finally then are here to deal with heavy aircraft threats and push your opponent back to ground. They also deal with things like Kodiaks and Basilisks that can otherwise pose a serious threat to your precious Mammoth tanks. Well, with all of that said, I'm pretty sure you guys are chomping at the bit to see these beasts do their thing, which means it's time for the featured replay. In this replay, Natural Sky on the left, Mr. Mammoth himself is running the Mam Air deck, up against Boo running a 4 War Factory deck with a nice little splash with an Orca and Shockwave Troopers. Now, Boo goes straight out with the War Dog scouting and then opens Harvester. Natural Sky is confident enough that the Tiberium fields are close enough that he can deal with any rush, so he sends out the Harvester first, then scouts with the Rifleman. Spotting those War Dogs, he brings out the Missile Squad, and ultimately at this point he's willing to hang back a little bit, keep things nice and safe, pull out that second Harvester. He knows that all he needs to do at this point is just to stall. If that means that he ultimately just keeps those pads on yellow, that's absolutely fine. He's got to assume his opponent is running an aggro deck, and if his opponent's not running an aggro deck and is in fact running a tech deck, then ultimately Natural Sky knows that he is going to be coming in with his own Mammoths and doing better. Drone Swarms come out to deal with those Shockwave Troopers, but unfortunately a Slingshot bullies those off into the corners. I don't think that Missile Squad is going to be able to do much to those War Dogs, or to that Slingshot, can't quite bully it, and very much the pressure looks like Boo is putting it onto Natural Sky right now. Yeah, down goes that second Drone Swarm. The Natural Sky looks very much like he's putting on the back foot, but check out those Tiberium scores at the moment in the bottom left. Currently, Natural Sky is sitting on 220, Boo is sitting there on 60 with plenty on the field. That tech lab is going to open any moment from now. All Natural Sky needs to do is just tease those pads, just hold things, keep things as steady as he can until out comes that Mammoth. Now straight away that Mammoth puts huge dents into the APC, and then boom, there we go, squishes down. A quick Jackson boost, because yes, with the Orca being out, the Orca is going to do some heavy damage to the Mammoth. The Mammoth then just goes around, does its usual cleanup, gets rid of every single one of those vehicles. Now here, the Laser Squads actually, since it looks like Natural Sky hasn't got quite enough Tiberium yet to pull out a Hammerhead, those Laser Squads are doing the same job of just keeping those Orcas at bay. Mammoth comes out, that looks very much like this is going to be comfortably Natural Sky's missile. Yep, the second Orca there isn't quite fast enough, does manage to take the Mammoth out though. Remember, an Orca is a dangerous threat to a Mammoth. Won't take it out in one hit, I think it usually takes 2 or 3 volleys at equal levels, but that's a significant amount of damage. War Dogs also are a surprisingly good blocker for Mammoth tanks, as it does take 2 volleys to kill them and they cost 10. At this point, I think Boo has kind of accepted that his fate is to die to these Mammoth tanks, and so he goes in to start doing a little bit of a base rush there. I think ultimately this may have been better served for him to go instead and to try and pull those pads, especially since those Orcas are really beginning to do some heavy work, and it does require Natural Sky to pull out 2 Hammerheads to deal with those. Unfortunately though, those Mammoth tanks have been doing the work, and even here as the Slingshot comes up the north, I just don't think that's going to be enough. Obviously there's still the Harvester there, That Mammoth, yep, quick Jackson boost to bring that Mammoth around, and bam, it just one-shots that slingshot out of existence, body blocked the APC with the Mammoth tank, and there we go. That's 1 pad to 2 contested. Second missile goes to Natural Sky. Beautiful use there of the Mammoth tanks. Just with that, making it, making sure that you stall long enough to get the Mammoth tank out. Then once it's out, making sure that it really does all the work that you can before it gets destroyed. In this case, that secured Natural Sky the win. Well played.